So again, I hope that folks found the first session on targeting to be very informative and helpful, and to provide some ideas that you can put in place immediately upon your return. We're now going to shift to start talking about the intersection of messaging and design. So you've established the action steps that you want people to take as a part of attending or part of visiting your exhibit. You've identified the people who can take those action steps, and now we need to talk about how do you develop the messages that will compel those targets to action. So to really briefly kick this off, we're going to revisit one of the fundamental concepts that Ed described in the first session, because it really forms the basis for this discussion, and that's the value chain. So again, the only thing that can produce ROI through an event marketing effort, or frankly any marketing effort, is action. That action should lead to real, tangible, well-defined business results. And the only thing that can compel that action is a really carefully constructed message, and we're going to talk about how to build those messages into your event marketing efforts, into your exhibits, into your promotions, and then into the experiences you want to create. So again, I'll turn it over to Ed Jones here to start talking about the intersection of messaging and design.
Excellent, Ted. Thank you. It always warms my heart to see that not everybody left during the break, so welcome back. How would everybody like to have a magic message? That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I actually had a presentation that I delivered at Exhibitor Show that was built around the concept of the magic message. And the title of it was How to Build Messages That Attract and Sell Customers and Even Impress the Company President. Now that violates every rule of what you would think an effective message would be, because it's too long, got too many words in it, and a whole bunch of other things. That session was always packed. And think about it for a minute. How to build messages that effectively communicate with and sell customers and even impress the company president. Now, if you're an exhibit manager, which many of you are, marketing manager, marketing director, whatever you may be, what's really important to you? How to sell customers, how to make sure that your output is becoming an important, recognized part of that, and how to impress the executives, or at least get the executives to recognize the value of what you're doing. Would that be right? And so that long message, which certainly would not pass any advertising exec inspection, fill the seats every time, because it had a whole lot of that what's in it for me built into it. You remember our little radio receiver, the what's in it for me receiver in our head? So that was an example of a magic message. And the result was that it put people in the seats. But a magic message is, what do I need to tell you, my target, in order for you to conclude that you need to act upon what it is I'm suggesting, and how that will generate results for my company? So the real key of this is just the first part. What is it specifically that I need to tell you to get you to act? And we're going to dissect this and find out what the contents of this must be in order to get John to do what it is I would like for John to do as a result of being at my event. Okay? So the magic message is, what do I have to tell my target that will result in my target taking the action? Now that clarifies a lot. How many of you have wrestled with all the messaging in your exhibit, and it's too much, or it's too specific, or it's too technical, or there are too many bullets, or there are too many products, or whatever it is? It boils down to what and only what do we need to say to these people who are visiting to get them to take the follow-up step. That's really what it boils down to. And that's a great clarifier. Okay. So Ted likes the 3 Ps. If you want to be friends with Ted, just go up and say, I really like the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps are, the magic message has to be persuasive, meaning it has to convince someone to do something. It has to be personal, just like that long course title that I gave you was very... Who would be interested in that course title besides the exhibit managers and marketing directors or marketing people? People would read that title and say, not for me, right? That's the best thing that can happen, because I don't want the people that it's not aimed to being interested in it. I only want the people that it's aimed at to be interested in it. So it has to be personal, and it also has, in order to work, it has to appeal to the desires, the wants, the needs, and the direction that an individual has in mind. Otherwise, they're not going to give it the time. It might be really well suited to satisfy the needs of the company, but unless it satisfies additionally the needs of the individual, they're probably not going to devote their time, the time you need for them to evaluate your offer and make a conclusion about it. So think back to the title that I gave you, how to build messages that communicate and sell customers and even impress the company president. So what was in there? There were two elements, right, of personal appeal. One was, this is good for the company because it will attract and sell customers. It was attract and sell customers. But what was the second half? And even impress the company president. Who is that aimed at? That is a very personal benefit for my target, is it not? Okay? So, personal. And then proactive. You're going to see in a minute that if you do your messaging right, you can take a visitor. What's your first name? Huh? Carly. Let's say Carly's coming toward my exhibit. How would you guys like for Carly, if she was coming to your exhibit, to be able to, number one, realize that it's for her, that she's going to benefit by learning what you have to say. Number two, know exactly where to go in that exhibit on her own without any help. And number three, be able to pick out which product or which discussion she actually is most interested in with no help. I call that a self-directed visit by a visitor. How many of you would like to have that? Okay? So proactive can mean directing the action of your visitors and your targets at the show, and it can mean directing their action to your follow-up step after the show. Okay, and there's our black screen. Let's go by that. Got it. So one of the things about magic messages is they have to be persuasive. Persuasion is to convince somebody to do something. And Aristotle, 2,000 years ago, bless his heart, figured all this out for us, and it really hasn't changed any since then. Bless your heart's a Southern phrase. So it means regardless of how bad a guy he was, he did something good. He wasn't bad at all, I'm kidding. But persuasion, Aristotle determined back then, really was based on the ability to appeal to an individual on three different levels. And if you could appeal to them on these three levels, your chance of getting them to do your bidding was extremely high. And the more you were able to appeal on each of these three levels, the more likely it was that you could get the outcome that you were looking for. So I want you to evaluate your messages in your exhibit against what I'm about to say, and also to make notes about what you could add to your messaging based on what I'm about to say that would make them more persuasive. All right, so the first element of persuasion, the three elements are, the three appeals are logos. Now logos is where we get our word logic from. And the one appeal, they're not necessarily, actually the last one has to be last, the other two are simultaneous. But I want to appeal to people logically. So when someone comes into my exhibit, I'll pick another guinea pig. Tell me your name. DJ. CJ. So if CJ listens to my demonstration, CJ is not going to continue to be interested or give me much more time unless it's adding up in her head how this is going to work and benefit her. Can you see your own situation and understand what I'm saying? Unless whatever I say next adds to the pile of things that you're thinking, yeah, this could be helpful. If what I'm saying next does not build on what I've said before and does not add to what I've said before, doesn't multiply what I've said before, eventually you run out of steam and you're going to turn and move away. But if it's logical and have you ever been in a presentation where you can anticipate the next thing because it's so in line with what you have in your mind that you know the next thing is going to be this, and if it is, you're going to be happy because it's on your track. You know what I'm talking about? So it's got to be logical. And the appeal is that it makes sense to you because it's logical. Okay? So are your messages logical? Have you built them from the customer perspective? Are they a cascade that starts at the top where it falls off the first level and continues to go down until you have a much bigger, wider rush of that water, that concept, that at the bottom comes crashing to a conclusion and everybody wants to, jump in and swim? So it's got to be logical. The second element is ethos. Ethos is where our word ethics comes from. And ethics actually sometimes can be a little arcane, but let me give you a definition that is broader than what you normally hear. Ethics is not whether we do the right thing or the wrong thing when nobody's looking, although that's a fun definition. Ethics really are what we're about. What are we made up of? What is the collective sum of our experience, our knowledge, our skills, and our certifications and validations from people and others in the world and in our industries and our companies that adds up to basically our credibility. So the ethics from a doctor, for example, would be that doctor's education, experience, internships, clinical trials. How many of you, when you're picking a specialist, look for somebody who's board certified? That's part of their ethics. That's their ethic, is that they're board, a piece of their ethic is they're board certified. Now, if I'm trying to sell something to someone or get them persuaded to do something, I might want to try to persuade them based on an appeal that my ethics are superior, that we're the best company, we're the oldest, most experienced company, we're the most highly rated company, we have the most patents, we have tremendous expertise on our staff, we have numerous hundreds of customers who are testimonials to how effective we are. All of that is an ethical appeal to convince someone that I am the best choice, that we are the lowest risk choice. And that reducing risk in a decision, reducing the perceived risk in a decision is huge. They can love what you're talking about, but if it's brand new and nobody else has tried it, you could think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but are you going to buy it? You're going to wait for other people to be the guinea pig, right? Because the ethics aren't there to support it. So ethical persuasion, one of the best things you can possibly do is show customer testimonials. So if you're selling something that works in a medical campus environment and you get, the Mayo Clinic to give you a testimonial on video that they've put it in and it works like a champ, then boom, you got all the ethical appeal that you could possibly want because of the prestige of something like Mayo Clinic, the parallel idea that they've done exactly what this prospect is considering. They feel very little risk that making that decision would be the wrong thing to do. And then there's pathos. Pathos sometimes is considered to be sad or an emotional response that is on the sad side, but not necessarily. In this sense, it's an appeal to the emotion to say, do you feel it? Do you feel like it's the right thing to do? You will be happier, or you will be energized or activated if you do this. And so how many of you are familiar with the term experiential marketing? This is where the experience transcends just the informational, which is the ethics and the logical, and moves it to the emotional. So that not only are they convinced that it's logical, that it's going to be good for them to do, and that you have the credibility to do it, but by golly, I feel good about it and I want to do it. So that's the catharsis at the end that goes from the I said it a minute ago and now I can't remember, but anyway, the informational to the emotional. And so if you can make an emotional appeal, we can get if you'll just do this, we'll have world peace tomorrow. I mean, or we'll end hunger, or we'll stop child abuse, or whatever it may be. But that is an emotional level appeal that makes someone have the opportunity to feel good about what they're about to do. And so that's why the experiential element of an exhibit is so important, because the other two things are more graphic in nature, and this is to take it through environmental context and interaction with the staff and the lighting and the textures and the whole thing. It all works together to make that person feel comfortable in doing what you're about to ask them to do. Make sense? Okay. Pretty good for 2,000-year-old stuff, isn't it? I mean, really, that's what I've described to you is not any, if you look this up and read about it, what I've told you is pretty much what you're going to read. So, WIIFM, all of you have a radio receiver in your head. It's automatically built in, you're born with it, and it picks up a certain signal. And that's from the radio station WIIFM. And when you hear that signal, you usually stop and listen so you don't get out of range to what that signal is broadcasting. And that WIIFM is what's in it for me. So when you walk by an exhibit that says enter here for some US Open tickets, to enter the drawing for some US Open tickets, if you're a big tennis fan, you're probably going to go in there, right? Now, if that exhibit is looking to attract tennis fans, that was a good idea. The personal appeal, the what's in it for me, was win US Open tickets. But guess what? Most companies that are giving away US Open tickets are not looking for tennis fans. They're looking for chemists and accountants and all kinds of other stuff. So they're really kind of populating their exhibit with people that can't do them any benefit. So that's a poor message. But it is nonetheless a what's in it for me message for tennis fans. So messages have to be personal. Now, at the International Builder Show, my client Owens Corning, huge building products supplier, was going to the show, and they had everything in the kitchen sink in their exhibit. And I did some exit interviews with people who had interacted with the staff. I had my team do exit interviews. And we found out that about 60% of the people coming out said they didn't learn anything new, which was horrifying because we had a bunch of new products and stuff in there. But the problem was the new stuff was so buried with the old stuff that most of the people coming out really didn't learn anything new. And the other problem was we weren't focused in that environment. We had everything in the kitchen sink, but it wasn't really focused as much as it should be on the individual benefits for home builders. So the next year we changed it and put in the message hierarchy that we're going to explain in a minute. And right below the Pink Panther Owens Corning logo was a big sign all the way around the exhibit that said, build more homes and sell more homes at a higher price. I'm trying to remember the exact words, but build better homes and sell them at a higher price, essentially is what it said. Okay, so if I'm a plumber, am I going to be compelled to enter that exhibit based on that statement? Probably not. If I'm a painter, probably not. And all these people are there, plumbers, painters, everything, roofers. But if I'm a home builder, what does that say? Build more better homes or better homes faster and sell them at a higher price. Who's going to stop and read that message? Home builders, right? And what are they going to do? They're going to come in because the next level sign said, come in and we'll show you exactly how with marketing support, et cetera, and several things that were the specific topics that we wanted to discuss with builders about how they could improve their own business. So that what's in it for me message was all about that builder going sell more homes at a higher price. That's pretty compelling. And with a big brand like Owens Corning who has the ethos to back it up, right? I want to go see what they've got to say. Does that make sense? Okay, you see how it's a what's in it for me message? And do you see how it selects the target naturally and pulls them out of the audience? Okay. So, magic messages are proactive. They need to, one of the things, if you're going to decide upon an action for your visitors to take after the show, you better tell them what it is, explain to them how to do it, make it easy for them to do it, and incent them to do it. How many of you have an incentive for your visitors to take a particular action after the show? You actually give them an incentive. Good. Okay. So magic messages need to be proactive. Come here and learn something. Do this after the show and you'll benefit XYZ, whatever it may be, but they have to be action oriented. That's really what that boils down to. All right. So let's look at bringing some of these magic messages to life in an exhibit environment. And first we're going to start with the mundane, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ted to do the more fun stuff where they actually have pictures of exhibits and stuff like that. But do you remember our fateful matrix diagram from the earlier presentation? Well, it's got another column on it now. And what I want to invite you to do is consider if you can adapt this somehow to helping to organize your messaging. So do you remember our senior manager for a large marine boat building company? And we said our action step would be to get them on the web estimator and to continue their participation when they got home. Everybody remember that? Okay. What was the magic message that we used to get that person activated to engage in the exhibit? Build more boats faster and use our web estimator to find out how. Is that a targeted message that only a person who'd have that responsibility would be interested in? Build more boats faster. It's very specific, isn't it? More and faster. You know, I got a thing from Holiday Inn one time, and it has been emblazoned on my brain as the ultimate marketing matrix forever. It just on the outside said, more, better, faster, free. I thought, how can I not open this? More, better, faster, free. That's pretty good. Build more boats faster and use our web estimator to find out how. This was a sign at about this level in the exhibit that let those people who had come in know that if you were interested in that, you could learn about it right here at this demo. And you'll see, Ted will show you where that fits in the exhibit. Now, you remember our dealer network? Owner, VP of Sales, large distributorship, join our dealer network and commit to sign up from a visit from sales. Was our action step. What was the magic message that got them engaged in the exhibit and with the final step? Sell more products to more builders, join the most exclusive dealer network in the industry. So sell more products to more builders. More was our word there. All right. These are not like super glossy, beautiful ideas. They're simple ideas, but I want you to get the message that you've got to have your magic messages appeal to the individuals and direct them to what you want them to do. Okay, is this clear? So if you could build a table for the messages and the audiences that you are going to address at a show, and then get your staff trained to use this as the way to convince people to move to the right part of the exhibit, to engage in the right demo, and to ask them to commit after the show to follow up, then you'd be rocket scientists. So now we get to the fun part that has pictures and color and all this stuff, because I do the mundane measurement and numbers and strategy stuff, and Ted gets to do the pretty stuff. Take it away, Ted.
Thank you, Ed. Inside the booklet you have from this morning, you do have the messaging matrix that Ed was just reviewing, and you also have the basics of the concepts we'll be reviewing throughout the remainder of this session. We're going to talk about incorporating those magic messages that you've established into your environment, so your exhibit structures, your booth layout, but also into your promotions, so the communications you are distributing before the show, your follow-up messages after the show, the pitches that your sales and marketing staffs are delivering inside of the booth or during the show. And then most importantly, how to design those magic messages into the experiences that you're looking to create at the booth. And it starts with the fundamental concept, just going to skip that frame real quick, of what we call the message hierarchy. So building your messages throughout your environmental or your structural space in a very organized manner, avoiding clutter, making it very logical for the exhibitor to find the information that they need, to find the area of the booth where they're gonna get the information or have the activation that's targeted for their needs. So it starts at the top here. You see a nice island-sized booth. Obviously, it starts with getting your brand out there big and bold. In many cases, in an island space, this is going to be accomplished through a hanging sign, a rigged structure, potentially some truss lighting, things of that nature. You want to start selling your targets from all the way across the show floor. You want to make sure that they see where you're at in the hall, see where your exhibit's located, and that's a great way to do so. And then near the top of the message hierarchy, you want to then be hitting them with that "what's in it for me" statement. So you want to state a problem or a pain point that your targets may be experiencing, and then relay what your solution is to that pain point and make that very clear. That's that emotional appeal that you're starting to generate, or that emotional response that you're starting to generate in your targets. And then you want to play traffic cop. If you've got a large exhibit, you need to have some street signs telling people where to go in the exhibit to get the product information, the service information that they really need. And then at that point, you want to establish, or you want to make it clear what action you want them to take, or what activity they can engage in right where they're standing. So you want to build those calls to action right into your exhibit messaging. And then lastly, near the bottom, for those who want to take the deep dive into your exhibit and into your brand and your products, you want to get into the nitty-gritty. You want to give them the opportunity to see your value propositions, to see your brand and product details. For those who don't necessarily follow this message hierarchy, this can often lead to death by bullet point, right? You want to eliminate that as much as possible by utilizing digital assets, looping videos, microsites available in your exhibit, potentially a tablet or other mobile device, where people who want to self-select to get that level of detail can really take that deep dive, but the rest of the attendees have a more cleaner experience of your brand design. Because we recognize that not everybody has the luxury of a large exhibit space, we've also built a version of the message hierarchy that speaks to smaller inline exhibitors, perhaps in a 10 by 10, 10 by 20 space, or even with a portable. You still need to be broadcasting your brand. That does catch eyes. You have about 3 seconds as somebody passes the 10 feet of your booth space to really capture them. You still need to incorporate that "what's in it for me" statement, that very personal targeting to their needs and their pain points. And then lastly, you do still need to give an opportunity for them to take that deep dive into the details of your product and your brand. And we'll get a chance to look at a couple of exhibits that utilize this message hierarchy pretty effectively. So this is, again, an example of a large island-style space. It's a 20 by 30 space. Up at the top, you've obviously got the brand big and bold. That's actually the hanging sign hanging over your head this morning. You've got "what's in it for me" statements located near the tops of the towers on all 4 corners. You've got traffic cop statements on the lower towers, telling people where to go and what they can learn in those areas. And then this exhibitor utilizes some flat screen monitors and then some laptops available in the meeting areas for people to get that, kind of nitty-gritty details about the product and services, have that self-directed visit to the exhibit. Another exhibit that really effectively utilizes the message hierarchy concept can be seen here. You've got backlit rigged signage showing the brand on all 4 corners. You've got "what's in it for me" statements on the sides of these large stanchions, and then a great way to play traffic cop in these hanging signs. Those are actually bottom illuminated, and they're casting a nice light onto those individual products. How easy is it to say, go to the blue part of the booth instead of go see the polymers or whatever? Go to the orange part of the booth to see what you want to see. So just a really effective usage of the message hierarchy in the space that they have. And then for a smaller exhibit and how to utilize that message hierarchy, this is a great example. So you've still got a really big and bold brand statement both in front and near the top of the exhibit. You've got "what's in it for me" statements along the banners there. And then the product itself, the nitty-gritty. They can literally put the watch on their wrist, see that product and how it works for them, how they look and feel when they've got that product on. In addition to designing or utilizing the magic message concept in your environments and in your booth structures, you also need to build that same philosophy into the way that you structure your promotional messages before, during, and after the show. And we'll look at a couple examples of that real quick. This exhibitor was showing at a large manufacturing show, and they had identified that they really had 3 target markets. One was a purchasing professional, one was an environmental professional, and then the third was kind of a frontline maintenance worker who couldn't make the decision to institute their products and services, but could go back to the office as an evangelist and sell this concept up through the channels to the decision makers. And so the messaging that they designed spoke very clearly to each of those 3 personas, For the purchasing professional, reduce your spend guaranteed. For the frontline maintenance professionals, they offered that team member a lunch and learn, so they would get a voucher to go back home, schedule an opportunity to have the decision makers in the room along with that frontline worker, and learn more about the products and services at that exhibitor's expense. They also established microsites for each of the 3 personas to speak very clearly in their language to their needs, to establish their credibility in those various areas, and also deployed some direct mail pieces that were, again, targeted to each of those 3 personas that they had identified. Another example of effective promotional design utilizing the magic message concept here. This exhibitor had identified that they really had 2 targets. One was a finance and insurance manager at a car dealership. The other was the dealership owner. And they were going to be giving away 25 F&I plans per day, and then also $5,000 worth of their products and services each day of the show. So they put together a direct mail piece that very clearly on the outside stated that value proposition: come by our booth, schedule the meeting, go through the experience that we've designed for you, and you'll be eligible for one of these raffles and giveaways. These only went out to people with the very specific job titles, very specific geographic locations that they needed. Once they got to the microsite via an email, there was an interactive experience here that showed the booth and left a little bit of mystery by covering a central element of the booth, kind of teasing that you have to come by our exhibit to see all the things that we can do. When they scheduled the app booth meeting for a specific time, they immediately received a VIP pass in their email that would allow them to kind of cut to the front of the line to experience this. So if they brought that up to the booth staffer, they wouldn't have to wait, in the line of people to have this experience at the booth. And then experiential design, we'll look at an example. It is the previous exhibitor whose promotional materials we were looking for. At the booth, you can now see that the central feature of that experience was a very sexy, Bumblebee Camaro, and then they had built an augmented reality experience where these VIPs could see a very technology-first example of how their products and services could really go to use for that dealership. So just really carrying that magic messaging concept all the way through, from the structure to the promotions to the experience that you're creating for your targeted attendees. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Ed to talk about how to measure and improve your usage of magic messages in your designs and experiences.
Thank you, Ted.
Yes, sir.
So I want to do a little skit for you before we do this to demonstrate this idea of self-directedness. I gave the example of the Owens Corning exhibit. So I'm going to pretend I'm a trade show visitor, and I happen to be a home builder, okay? So I'm wandering around and talking to my buddy, and I look up, and several hundred feet away, I see the big Pink Panther in the Owens Corning graphic element above their exhibit. And I say, "Oh, Fred, Owens Corning's here." Of course, they're here every year. As a matter of fact, maybe we've got some other things to see that are new. We kind of know everything about them. We know what all they have. So, let's go look at some other things, and maybe if we have time, we'll catch them later, because we know all about them. I call that, by the way, that's when your brand sometimes, which is very dominant in the industry, can work against you, because people who feel like they already know you very well will spend their time looking for new things and may bounce off of their familiarity because of their familiarity with you. So follow my example. So we walk around, we look at some new exhibits. We finally get on that aisle where Owens Corning is, and I'm walking along, and I'm thinking, yeah, the Owens Corning, they've always got a great exhibit. Build more homes, sell more homes at a higher price. Interesting. Now, that's new. I didn't know that they had that. And then I look right below that, and I see marketing support, warranty support, quiet zone, which is keeping your ducts and pipes quiet in these new expensive homes where you have home theaters and all that. So fiber insulated ducting, eliminates all the noise out of the HVAC system. And the more I look, having been attracted by a message to me as a home builder, after already concluding I wasn't going to see them, I say, well, they've got some new stuff here about helping me sell more homes at, faster and at a higher price. And I also see there's some new information on customer service and marketing support and warranty support. I guess I am going to spend some time there. So I go in and I walk up to this wall. This is the one on customer service, marketing, and warranty support. And I walk up and talk to the guy that's standing there or the gal that's standing there and say, so you're going to help me sell more homes faster and at a higher price? I'm all ears. And then that person who's going to do the demo is off to the races and starts telling me what I want to know. Is that practical, feasible, believable? That's actually what happened. Our attendance increased, the number of interactions as a percentage of all the visitors who came to the exhibit increased, and we had about 80% of the people saying they learned something new when they left. And I attribute it primarily to message improvement and layout of the exhibit along a messaging visitor management strategy and content being organized that way. Is that believable? Okay. So how do you measure this stuff? Well, you can do brand recognition studies. You can find out before the event and after the event how visitors' perceptions of your brand or a product identity might shift. You can do product awareness studies. Exhibit surveys on the really big shows, or most of the shows, will already have done research that indicates what the most memorable exhibits were and what the most sought after products were. There's all kinds of research around some shows that if you don't know of, at least start looking for it. And you can participate in that research as it's a syndicated research piece where 6 or 7 companies at the show will pay for the research to find out how they stack up against everybody else on recall and awareness and several other things. One of the best things to do is stop people coming out of your exhibit. And so tell me your name. Maddie. Okay, good. So Maddie has just been in my exhibit. She's interacted with the staff. So she's on her way out, and one of my young, good-looking young people with a clipboard or a tablet in their hand will say, "Hi, I'd just like 1 minute of your time. I noticed that you interacted with the Owens Corning staff while you're here at the show. I'd like to ask you just 2 questions or 3 questions about that interaction. Would you mind doing that?" And then I'll ask her who she is and her company, and then I'll say, "Did you learn anything specifically while you're in the exhibit? Could you tell me what that is?" And then I just put it down. And then I say, "Maddie, so based on what you learned in the exhibit, is there anything you're planning to do when you get home based on what you learned?" And she'll say, "Well, yeah, actually, when I get home, I'm going to call a committee meeting together and tell them about this thing that potentially is a big change for us, and we're going to maybe explore it further." That's all I really need to know, isn't it? Is what did she learn and what is she going to do as a result of her visit? And I can do that just by stopping 100 people over the 3 days using young, attractive men and women, college-age people that look good and are engaging, to stop people as they come out of their exhibit experience and find out the most important things we want to know. Exhibitor attraction scores, that's part of that show research I talked about. How many gross impressions did you make? You remember when we were talking about targeting, we looked at target impressions, but gross impressions are on the eyes and ears of everybody. And when we have a big presence at a show, maybe we utilize, the press to make more impressions for us. We do some sponsorships, some media type based stuff. We can make a huge impact on the fact that we've got new products, that we're the most innovative. We're always, moving the sites down the road. We're one of the leaders in the industry. So that can be measured. And then let me ask you a show of hands. How many of you do a survey of your internal staff and stakeholders after your events? Okay. That is one of the easiest and most important things you can do is after every event is do a very objective, organized survey of how well the internals who funded the event, the stakeholders who depend on the event, felt about how well it was done and how effective it was, including how effective was the show opportunity itself. Sometimes what you do is perfect, but the show is not so good. Or sometimes it's a good show and what you did is perfect, but it was in Washington in January and you had a snowstorm that closed the airport. So wasn't anything in your control, but it's still not going to, be something that satisfies the desire to have payback on the investment that year. It just happens. It's part of the game. But you need to know what your staff and stakeholders think. So staff and stakeholder surveys, something you could ask these Gateway guys about. I've supplied them with examples of staff and stakeholder surveys that work, And one of the problems is you might have tried to do it before and gotten very little response, but there are some tricks to make sure that that response comes in. They work so well that the divisions at Raytheon, I'm going to tell you two things about Raytheon and then we're done. The divisions at Raytheon began to compare how many interactions their people had at trade shows with the other divisions, because that was something we started publishing when we started doing post-show research with the internals. We would say, okay, well, the IDS division had 600 interactions and the other division only had 300 interactions, and all of a sudden you've got division presidents going, why did we have 300 when they had 600? And so whatever is measured is generally respected and many times gets attention. So you can bet that people were a little bit more encouraged to respond to those surveys when their executives are breathing down their neck for being underrepresented. So those are just some of the natural dynamics of organizations. The other thing I'll tell you, if I didn't tell you before, because in the rehearsal I actually mentioned this and I can't remember if I did it for you already, but the chief executive officer of Raytheon, all of his direct reports come to the Paris Air Show. And that's like 13 people. The direct reports to the chief executive, to the CEO. And the CEO would have 32 meetings in the course of 3 days. And every one of the direct reports, average number of meetings was over 35. How would you like to have your executive team participate in your trade shows at that level? And to cap it off, the chairman mentions the trade show program on the earnings calls with the investors. I think I said that in the earlier module, did I? How would you like for your chairman to talk about your trade show program on the investor call? That's pretty amazing. So, and that client, when they started with me, basically hired me because there was a somewhat negative perception among executives and sales about the trade show program. So, let's stop there. I think I'm done. Yep. And have questions and answers and discussion just like we did before. I'll ask you the same question. How many of you got something out of this that you can actually put to work? Okay, that makes me happy.